Guardian? Eyes up, Guardian.
Now, we are in the throes of the Iron Banana, and I'm finally back in the swing of Destiny. Like, despite not doing a show for over a year, Season of the Drifter has pulled me back in a way that I had not expected it to. I expected it to be my least favorite, just because of my general disdain for the character of the Drifter, but Bungie is knocking it out of the park in terms of story and lore and development and engaging content to play. I'm finding myself playing more Destiny now than I did, especially in Black Armory and even in the tail end of Forsaken, where I completely bypassed the Dreaming City. Like, every week I have a reason to come back, not only the initial Allegiance quest line, but now with the Invitations of the Nine that have rolled out, it is astounding. And what's nice is that they're making it accessible. So, like, the Invitations of the Nine, we're on week 3 now, and they've all involved just running a strike and then getting drops out of specific groups of enemies, usually Fallen and Cabal. And then, what was it? We mixed in Vex this week, and I think we did Hive at one point. But it's not hard. It's not difficult, and you actually get to see story develop around an entity that we've been wanting to know more about since, the first Destiny. But at that time, I don't think Bungie had a very clear idea as far as what they wanted to do with the story and who these entities were. And while everybody was wildly spitballing, I know I myself was wildly guessing about who the Nine were, and we had all these wild theories based on when Trials of the Nine was around in the beginning of Destiny 2. But now that they seem to have hammered that stuff out, we're actually moving the story forward in a very meaningful way, and I am thrilled. Like, I look forward to Fridays now at Reset. Like, all right, let me find that tentacly faced fuck and grab his bounty and learn a little bit more. And the first week, was a lot. We had a really long quote unquote long, but long for Destiny standards, cutscene between one of the shadows of Yor and the Drifter, and then we had the emissary from the Nine. And then the past 2 weeks now, we've gone and we've met with the emissary in one of the planes in the Nine, where she's actually talking to the Nine, and we hear them. Like this week itself, we had her talking with the Nine about Mara Sov, where we warp into one of the Nine zones, and we see this big statue of Mara, and the Nine is saying how Mara will fail and she's gonna die, and the emissary's like, no, fuck you, she's strong, she knows what she's doing. And all the while, this gigantic not monolithic, but this gargantuan statue of Mara Sov is slowly turning to face you. And then when the emissary disappears at the end of the conversation, it is it's just left there facing you. And each time you complete one of these missions, it's nice to get the powerful gear, but there's not really enough time to sit there and explore what's going on. But I'm just so thrilled that they're making it accessible to players. Black Armory was terrible for this, and how they doled out the story with the random drops for completing forges, and it all being through quest text. And I was worried that they were doing a similar misstep with the Allegiance quest, to the point where it wasn't even about the Vanguard versus the Drifter. It was about the Praxic Order, and not even the Praxic Order, but one rogue agent, Honor, who just came off as a bitch at the beginning. And unless you were reading those messages that would get sent to you, you really had no idea about the overarching story at work here. It just comes back to Bungie not being good at telling stories, but it looks like they finally turned this around. Hopefully they see the reaction and continue to develop their story in a similar fashion. I don't know, I'm super excited. And now that Iron Banner's back, and I threw myself into that wholeheartedly and got all the bounties completed last night. But Iron Banner has been kind of lacking for me in Destiny 2 as a whole. I had always looked forward to Iron Banner in Destiny 1 because the way they worked it, the only way to get the most powerful gear in the game was to do the end game content like raiding, and I didn't find a raid team, even then it wasn't a regular raid team, until the end of Rise of Iron when we were doing the Siva strikes. I mean, not the strikes, the raid. And that was the only way to get, true end game gear, unless you were doing Iron Banner. So once a month it would roll around, and rather than be tied to a set number of bounties, which then tied you to a set number of powerful upgrades, you could just continually grind out this PvP curated, playlist and just beat all kinds of ass. And it wasn't always control like it is in Destiny 2. They rotated out the play styles, and I loved it. Not only for my ability to get new, more powerful gear, but also get cool looking gear. And my Titan wore the Iron Banner gear predominantly, just because I loved the look of it, especially the chest and the shoulder pieces. But even my Warlock wore the robes. My Hunter wore most of the kit because it was just so well designed. And maybe it's my affinity for, medieval Europe and knights and all that. Like, I like big armor. I cannot lie. Fuck me, I hate myself for saying that. But when we get this samurai-inspired armor that has dominated Destiny 2, it's just like, I couldn't give a fuck. I don't care. The only armor set that I collected for Iron Banner was this last season, not the current one, but the one before. And even now, I'm tempted to delete it just because the enhancement core economy is so fucked up. I don't want to worry about grinding up a second set of gear. And, it's terrible. It's très terrible. So no, I mean, it was... I got bit by the bug for Iron Banner this week. I don't know why, but maybe it is because I am so close to 700, where I only have 4 slots left. I have my 3 weapon slots, and I think it's my legs left to get up to 700. And I was hoping it would grind it out, but I think the powerful gear drops are still a bit fucked up, to where I am getting powerful drops. However, they're at my current light level or below, like 1 light level below. So, I should be getting around 699, but they'll give me 698 pieces. The only source for reliable 700 drops has been the Prime Ingrams, but for whatever reason, they keep giving me helmets and chest pieces. And I don't really want to waste the enhancement cores on building up secondary pieces of armor, even like my exotics, because of how scarce enhancement cores have been. And with Bungie recently announcing, enhancement cores are going to be changing come June, to where we will be getting bounties from Banshee using gunsmith materials. We don't know how much those are going to be. We don't know how often they're going to pop up. Whereas the scrapper bounties, I can get 2 or 3 a day if I'm playing, hard enough, and they're easy to complete. And, I'll get my 2 cores a day from Spider. But I'm currently sitting around 15, and there's so much armor that I want to upgrade and invest, and I can't do it. And I recently did change out my armor set from... I was running a lot of year 1, year 2 stuff just because of the appearance, but I realized I was sorely missing out on perks and abilities because they just don't have any rolls on them whatsoever. So this season I did decide the Eververse set actually looks decent enough, so I went and I didn't spend any silver to get them, but I mean, if you play enough, eventually you're going to get the whole set from Tess. It's not hard to do, and I did. I got decent rolls on it, so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stick with this. If I get some other pieces that drop from it and work well, fantastic. But if not, I'm happy with this, and then I can mix in different exotics depending on what I'm doing. You know, like for PvP, we'll do One-Eyed Mask. Otherwise, I'll just run Sentinel and do Synthoceps and be okay. I don't need to mess around, you know, Hollow Fire Heart at the absolute most if I'm going to be doing Solar or Insurmountable Skullfort for Arc. But again, I'm not fucking around a whole lot with different armor pieces. Like, beforehand, I had a whole PvP set. I had a cosmetic PvE set. And then I was working on a Gambit set. It's like, cores are too precious to be investing in all that. And then same thing for weapons. You know, I would have about 6 weapons in each slot that I would regularly rotate through. And now it's like, nope, let's pare this down. You know, for primaries, let's do Thorn, Ace of Spades, and Horror Story until, you know, I should be getting Breakneck here today. We'll see how that stacks up, and I can maybe replace Horror Story. Secondary, we're just going to do Ikelos Shotgun and Le Monarch. Oh god, Le Monarch is so good for Gambit. I am in love with that bow. And then for heavy, I mean, Hammerhead never really leaves the heavy slot. I used to relegate that solely to Sleeper Simulant, but since the ammo nerf and just let's be honest, the LMGs are essentially scout rifles with their accuracy and range and their ability to clear ads. And I don't have the god roll of it, but god damn is it still such a good gun the way it is. I think Ada has the LMG frame up this week. I should see if I can get another roll of that. But this is what I'm talking about, where Destiny like has me enthralled again about what I'm doing with the character. And fuck Bungie for making me admit it, but because of the scarcity and enhancement cores, I'm really paying attention to the choices that I'm doing with my character and what I'm investing in. Like right now, I'm torn between, you know, blowing all my cores and masterworking this one set of armor, or holding off and, you know, making sure I can get everything up to 700. I know the 700 will come, but like I have enough cores to masterwork out a couple pieces, but fuck them for doing this to me. Speaking of which, I don't know if they did something, because I had always read theories about Reddit on how you could exploit Brother Vance when Spider was selling the simulation seeds for legendary shards. So yesterday I did spend about 300 shards going over to him, and I got, I don't know, 4 or 5, which I guess is good, but I always thought you should be getting a lot more out of that. I think you should be getting more enhancement cores to begin with, but that's beside the point. We should get rid of them entirely. But enough of my rambling. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the subreddit here. Let me see if we can pull it up. There's been a lot of conversation about spoilers and the story for Destiny 3 being leaked. Somebody yesterday on the Destiny lore subreddit had talked about being that Anon, or they weren't the Anon. Essentially, there was a person who had leaked several bits of information about Destiny 2 and was pretty spot on with what they had speculated. And they did a post last night. I'm looking to see if I can find it. Because this is just great podcasting. Anywho, it originated, I believe, on 4chan, but they had talked about several pieces of new information. So Destiny 3 is supposedly being released in fall of next year, and I know all about it. Ask me anything. So I guess we're just going to go bit by bit here and kind of give impressions on how likely we think this is. So the Darkness is actually a race of interdimensional beings known as the Veil. That's possible. I mean, we all have already known that they're at least another race. They're supposed to be the fifth enemy type. The game's storyline is based around the second collapse. Essentially, the Veil will use the light to resurrect the Formless One. Sounds like we're summoning up an old god. It's introduced as a brand new darkness element, brand new type of open world that focuses on faction-oriented gameplay between Dark and Light Guardians. And this could make sense based on the choices that we've been seeing with the Season of the Drifter, as we work between, the Dredgens and darkness, the powers of dark versus the power of, traditional light with Solar, Arc, and Void. And how Shin Malphur is trying to shape Guardians to kind of be somewhere in the middle, and Bungie keeps teasing things like, oh, the choices you make now will impact the story going forward. And this is something that I had, brought up months ago on the subreddit, like, oh, what if we have Dark Guardians? Now I was way off the base because I didn't realize there was already a lot of established lore on this, but interesting concept. Let's see. Cabal and Fallen are out as enemy races. They're being replaced by the Veil, which are brand new massive enemy race. This actually makes sense because the Fallen are all but extinct. They have similar numbers to humanity, so it doesn't make sense that we keep killing them over and over again. And when we have characters like the one Fallen that we met on Titan, who's now working with Guardians and has made a House of Light, it would make sense. Same with the Cabal. We don't know how vast their army is and how many of them are in it, but based on what we hear from the Drifter when we're doing the Warden strike, it sounds like we have pretty much all but obliterated them as well. We have them on the ropes, so it would be cool to see them as allied races, and it'd be even more interesting if we get them as playable. Like, I'd love to see Fallen as a playable race, and that's something we could definitely do on next gen, but it would be requiring Bungie to, like, I understand why they did Awoken, Exo, and Human, because they essentially all share the same type of character models. Fallen would require a considerable amount of work, and even Cabal, but I would love to be a big fat Cabal Titan or a spindly Fallen Hunter. Like, it makes sense. Ooh, or even put some space wizard robes on a Cabal. Excuse me. The Veil have more combat units than every race combined to compensate for the lack of Cabal and Fallen, which are now allied with the city. I would hope for more variety. It's been years and years and years, and we kind of fight the same things, and our bosses are just bigger forms of the guys we fight. The Vex, Hive, and Taken are returning enemy races. The Veil and Aphelion are two new races being introduced in D3. Xivu Arath has a huge role in the storyline. This would make sense if we wrap up with Savathun as the big bad for D2, because there would only be one surviving sibling from the Hive trio, with Oryx in the first game, Savathun in the second game, and then Xivu Arath in the third. Like, it just makes sense. The Nine are also big players. Their help gets enlisted after the Veil take the system where you meet each of them. Now, this could play out just because we have been delving deep into the Nine, and it could be setting up for new things, and with a lot of theories about how the Nine are essentially dark matter bodies based around our planets, it would make sense why they don't want the darkness to take over. But there's this whole theory about there's two actual factions, and ultimately all they want to do is be made corporeal in our dimension versus subsisting in their own. Calus has a massive role in the story, which continues from the events of Penumbra. He's leading the new Shadow faction. Again, without doing the raids, I don't have a whole lot of info on Calus himself. It's all hearsay and what I've read on the Ishtar Collective. But I would be disappointed if Calus, not that Kalos has a big role, but that they're setting it up this way, because it leads me to believe that we're not going to get another bit of content for D2 after Season of Penumbra, which is going to start in June. Like, I would hope for another big expansion, but again, Bungie hasn't announced anything really since the split with Activision. Factions grant you specialized abilities and perks. Certain factions, such as the Veil's Hand, enable you to tap into darkness powers. The game opens up with a massive war campaign. All forces of the solar system are fighting against the darkness. The Traveler's critically injured at the beginning of the game and gets overwhelmed. I'd be kind of pissed if they went this route where 2 games in multiple years, we finally get the Traveler awoken at the end of D2. He's been sitting around for a year doing fuck all. And when it is finally time for him to bust ass, he just gets rendered inert again. It's just like a lot of wasted potential and a lot of build-up towards nothing. Europa, Old Chicago, Venus, and Hollow Spire are the game's base worlds. In the story, darkness completely decimates the city and all of Earth. Doesn't make sense then if they decimate all of Old Earth that we're getting Old Chicago. Old Chicago does make sense though, because it was in the concept art for Destiny 1. Venus, it was a place in, first Destiny as well. It'd be interesting to go back, but I don't know. I mean, we'll probably get the Reef back. I don't know. I'm still upset that they never really kept all the old content and rolled in new stuff. I wanted a big living, breathing world. Guardians get pushed into the solar system and have to kill the Entombed, the 7 leaders of the Veil. No idea. I mean, it'd be nice to have the darkness fleshed out, but it seems like I like the big ominous threat in this kind of old gods approach to it, but that's just me. I understand they're going to probably tone it down and make things more the way they were. Hollow Spire is the new big endgame zone akin to the Dreaming City. It's where a lot of PvP gameplay faction is going down. Monolithic alien city where the deep, formless one originated from. So do we get to playing fucking Ryla from Cthulhu? Each planet is larger than those of Destiny 2. There's a plethora of things to do, such as dungeons and holds. This makes sense. Bigger, better, more to do. Claiming holds is the basis of the faction war gameplay, and planets change depending upon which faction is currently dominating them. This makes sense with what they're doing for the Dreaming City, just because we do have that rotation and changes do occur based on how the raid itself gets played out. I don't know how well it's going to hold based on my experience with, World of Warcraft, where the fuck was it? Southwest corner of Kalimdor, where the Gates of Ahn'Qiraj opened up, and it was just this big PvP battle zone. And then we had the Wrath of the Lich King Wintergrasp. It's interesting, but I don't know. I think keep PvP in the Crucible, keep it in dedicated areas, but if you're going to expand the story of Guardian on Guardian violence, I guess, again, it makes sense, but it would be a really, really bad design choice. I don't think it would make sense if they want to keep a casual audience. Yeah, it's good to cater to hardcores, but you can't go so far that you alienate the large portion of the player base. Veil enemies can drastically affect your abilities and the surrounding environment. They're pushing for a greater variety in PvE gameplay. The Veil enemies can suppress light-based abilities and can also bend and nullify the gravity in areas that surround them. So they do environmental attacks, and kind of like the grenades that hunters and titans can throw out can, temporarily tamper your abilities. It's nothing new that we haven't seen before. Sure, they can be annoying to fight against, but then it just implements a new strategy, just like you're fighting any other enemy type. The Aphelion are the most dangerous race in the game and are glass cannons. They have ability to suppress all your abilities and can nullify resurrection. This doesn't make any fucking sense. Lore perspective, yeah, great, but for actual gameplay, we have areas where, yeah, your light can fade, but to have enemies specific to do that, that's just, no, that makes zero fucking sense. Game is shipping with 2 massive raids. I know the first one takes you into the heart of the Hallowed Spire, where you'll be facing down, the Formless One, the Heart of the Deep itself. It's a massive 12-player raid. That's the grand finale of the Second Collapse storyline. This doesn't make sense that they're going to open up their story with this big, ancient, old god, and then do a 12-player raid to kill it and have 2 raids? No. Destiny always starts off with 1 raid. It's hard enough to do with 6. Doing more people in a raid would be terrible and for such a mechanics-heavy system that Bungie's implemented. And they're not going to write off their story as quickly as they did. They kind of did it with Gaul in the beginning of Destiny 2, but it was so poorly received. I don't think Bungie would make the same mistake twice, especially with the Darkness being what they are. You can't tease this much and have so little payoff. Like, it's just a terrible fucking move. And no. Like, this part is... That makes no fucking sense. And the second raid is focused around the Hive, which would make sense if they have Xivu Aerith coming in. Guardians can represent a number of factions that include Future War Cult, New Monarchy, Dead Orbit, Veil's Hand, Emperor's Shadow, and House of Judgment. Factions may or may not be returning. Yeah, that could just be speculation. Trials of the Nine is coming back, hosted by the Nine themselves this time around. They are also the heads of their own faction, which is based on ranking up in Trials specifically. I don't think that would play out, just because Trials has always been about the sweatiest of sweaty PvP competition. You can't make a faction base entirely around it because it would alienate the player base itself. And the way they're bringing in the Nine into other areas of the game, yeah, they could be a faction, but it's not going to be based on ranking up in Trials. It's dumb. That makes no sense. Destiny 3 is being developed to return to form to hardcore players and veterans of the series. Yeah, that's nice and all, but you can't swing too far in that direction. It would be a bad play on Bungie's part. So, yeah, that's going to wrap it up. Hoping to make this show weekly because, again, people are complaining about TUA where I was just rambling about Destiny too much. So, we'll isolate it on its own. And then, yeah, try to have something new to talk about each week. But otherwise, we'll talk to you